Welcome to the What is Life Dude podcast. We're your hosts, Eric and Sarah. I'm a freelance musician.
And I'm a vegan chef and food blogger. This is where we share our thoughts about building a healthy relationship, working as creatives on our own terms, and living with intention and authenticity.
We don't have it all figured out yet, but every conversation gets us a little closer to answering the question, what is life, dude? Hello, and welcome back to the What is Life Dude podcast, everybody. We are Eric and Sarah.
Welcome back.
I thought you were going to go with greetings again today.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. Mm-hmm. We've been going to sleep at 2 a.m. recently and waking up at like 10:30. Mm-hmm. So we're sleeping a normal amount of time, but our schedule has been shifted way later. So I feel a little weird. It's 4:50 in the afternoon right now, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe we're recording the podcast so late. Mm-hmm. But we only woke up like 6 hours ago.
And the interesting thing, too, is that we have not adjusted our meal times. So now that it's 4, I'm like, it's time to start thinking about what we're going to have for dinner. Because we usually eat around 6:30.
And we just don't eat breakfast anymore. We just go right to lunch. Everything's
a little weird right now, and we're not fighting it too much because we're going to be moving in a few weeks, a little over 2 weeks, right around 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
Less than 2 weeks.
I have no concept of time. Almost ever. I really depend on this guy to keep me grounded.
Hey, that's me. I was waiting for you to have that realization, holy shit, it's less than 2 weeks. And you didn't because of numbers.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's okay. It's less than 2 weeks. Today's Tuesday, and we're leaving a week from Sunday. Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I should say we're going to give a little life update, moving update before we get into the main topic. So if you're not interested, maybe skip ahead a couple minutes.
Yeah, I can put a timestamp in the YouTube description if you're watching.
Right. So if you guys are watching on YouTube, and you're used to our usual background, you might notice that some things are missing from our walls because we started to pack up again.
Yeah, we took we had 6 guitars hanging on the walls, 4 on that side and 2 behind me. They're all gone and in cases. We went on a packing spree. Mm-hmm. Okay, last time we moved, and I'll talk about this a little, how it relates to the main topic, but for right now, let me just say, when we moved last time, it was so stressful, and we had so much stuff, and we had to donate so much stuff, and it was so stressful, and I keep feeling like it's going to be like that again right now. Yeah. And then I kind of look around and realize we didn't add much to our belongings since we've lived here. So it's like we have the same amount we moved with last time. We don't have to go through everything and toss stuff or
and
donate
sell things, which took up a lot of time.
We just have to put it back the way it came and put it into a moving pod again.
Indeed.
So it's still stressful because moving is
inherently stressful, I would say. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wonder if there's a personality that thrives on that energy.
Maybe.
I mean, we're kind of talking about how I even have trouble packing for trips. Even if it's we did a little 3-night trip to Palm Springs a couple months back. Holy crap.
Yeah, it was December.
And even packing for smaller trips really stresses me out. So, but I know some people are constantly on the go and they thrive off of that and they like backpacking and stuff.
Yeah, I think I learned that's not for me. I mean, we thought about, you remember when we moved here, we were like, next time, or when we move out, we're going to hire movers.
Yeah.
I realized that movers don't pack your shit. They just help you move the shit you packed. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the worst part, at least for us, because we have a dresser and nightstands and a bed. We don't have that much furniture. We only have a few things.
I wouldn't mind movers, but we don't have enough stuff really to justify that expense right now.
But packing all the little things, I mean, we'd still have to do that either way.
Yeah.
And but that's moving, and we leave in 10 days-ish, and I'm not sure what's going to happen with the podcast over that time.
We're going to release things on time.
I know we're going to release things on time, but we talked about maybe skipping the week that we're traveling. But if we find the time to
backlog an episode,
yeah, I'm sure we can squeeze it in.
Right.
Because at some point, all of this is not going to be here, all the recording stuff, and we're going to have to. Well, you remember the episode right before we left Colorado? We were like sitting in like an empty room, and all we had was your computer and the microphones. It's a little more advanced now that we have the filming set up, but we'll work it out.
It's funny that certain things stress me out so disproportionately, and this is not one of them.
And this stresses me out a lot.
Yeah, I think that we could create a podcast anywhere.
That is true.
It kind of feels exciting, the thought of doing it like at one of our pit stops. But
I'm glad
not
it excites you.
Yeah.
It does not excite me to drive for 6 hours and then do a podcast in a hotel room. I do know what you mean, though. It is kind of like how we did the podcast in Palm Desert, and it was like, ooh, our setup's mobile now. It's on the move.
Yeah,
it was pretty cool.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to our topic from last week, which was rest, and it's just different people find different activities restful. And for me, I don't feel necessarily emotionally drained after having our podcast conversations. I feel like good. I feel energized. So the thought of driving and then doing it doesn't feel too bad to me,
Okay.
But we'll figure it out.
Well, we will be driving over the course of the days we usually would record the podcast, right? Because we usually do it anywhere from Sunday to Tuesday, and we will be driving those days, so it is good timing.
So tell them where we're stopping.
I'm glad you cut me off because I didn't have an end to that sentence.
Right.
I would have just like slowly been saying words until it concluded. Okay, so on the first day, we're going from San Diego to Scottsdale, Arizona, which is, I guess, a part of Phoenix. And then the second day, we're driving from Scottsdale to Albuquerque, which I've Googled so many times, I can now spell it perfectly off the top of my head.
Albuquerque.
Weird Al has a song called Albuquerque, and it gets stuck in my head when I think about it. And then the third day, we're going from Albuquerque to my mom's house in a more southern part of Colorado. We're going to stay with her for a night, and the next day, we're going to wake up and drive to northern Colorado and go to our new house.
Which will be empty.
Completely empty.
Which is different because when we moved here, you may know my family lives here, so
they're our family now.
We had a bed waiting for us that we could borrow, and we could use my family's kitchen stuff. Not that we did. We just ordered Thai 3 days in a row, which was nice. Fun memory.
I'm sure we'll do the same thing as we're leaving here. Order Thai 3 days in a row.
Yeah, so our plan is to pack a couple of pieces of cookware, our computers, maybe some instruments, and purchase an air mattress somewhere along the way so that until our stuff gets dropped off there and we can unpack, we can eke out an existence. No, I think it'll be great. I think it'll be fun. One of the reasons I do like traveling is that I get to leave all my shit at home and I'm there with just the things that I need.
Yeah.
And I even end up overpacking. So it's like, I don't know. When I am traveling, it feels very simple. Life feels simple and uncomplicated.
My mom's like, well, you can stay like a few days. And I'm like, we kind of want to go to our empty apartment. And like, it'll be one of those, this is kind of how you phrased it to me. You were like, oh, it'll be one of those memories we look back on. Like, remember when we spent like 3 or 4 days in our apartment before
With
we
no
had
furniture?
Yeah, before we had like most of our stuff.
Yeah.
And we kind of just like, remember that memory? And I want to have that. I want to make that memory.
Yeah, it reminds me when we visited Costa Rica for your friend's wedding, and we would just walk down to we walked everywhere. We just lived really simply. We ate really simply. I know a lot of people travel and they they have a budget for food.
We just bought rice and beans and hot sauce.
Yeah, and we made the simplest meals, and we watched some Friends, and it was so nice.
Yeah.
Just a nice little reset.
We watched Friends.
Yeah, we watched Friends on Valentine's Day.
Yeah,
you remember that?
It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That was fun. We'll go back.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to make those memories and see what happens. Also, the place we're moving, it's in like a little neighborhood, but right near like one of the main roads in the town. So we can walk to Trader Joe's, which I'm so excited about. I mean, we were talking about how I really wanted to live near Trader Joe's because I love Trader Joe's, and we've never lived close to one. We've lived like a 20-minute drive from one.
And we never went there.
Exactly.
And then when we finally went there, and then that was when my wallet got stolen.
Oh my God.
I have bad Trader Joe's juju.
God, I remember that. Well, and the other thing, we were like, oh, we want to be able to walk to a grocery store. That would be so cool.
Yeah.
And it's both. We can walk to the grocery store we want it to live by.
Yeah.
It's the little things.
Yeah, my favorite place I've ever lived, I always tell Eric, is the place that I lived right before I moved to Colorado. And it was like it was in the Bay Area, so it was busier than, where we're going in Colorado, but it wasn't super busy. And I was like 10 minutes away from this little, I don't know, not a strip mall, but this area with like a Trader Joe's, and my gym was there, and there was a Safeway and a couple different shops and coffee shops and stuff. And it was just really nice. I never really used my car unless I was going somewhere else.
Yeah. That'll be nice.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the moving update. Do you want to do a little positivity box?
Sure.
Do you have something? I thought of something last night.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Yeah, that was my hint of saying I want to go first.
Yeah, you always do.
I opened me and Sarah's computers. I didn't talk about this on the podcast, did I? No. I opened up our MacBooks, and I took a can of compressed air, and I cleaned the literal crap out of the fans, all of the techie hardware stuff that I've always been too afraid to look at.
So much lint.
Yeah.
And dust.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing?
I think lint is like clumps of dust.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was caked on the fans. I had tweezers, and I was pulling out huge lumps of lint from like just random crevices in our computers. And now we noticed when we turn our computers on, if we're doing something that is taxing on the computer, the fans actually blow air out of the computer, because we're used to just hearing the fans blow and that's it.
Computer getting really hot.
Yeah, but now the fans blow and air comes out, which is normal, and it's doing wonders for our computers. It just makes me really, really happy.
I'm glad, because I was definitely feeling my computer was on its last legs, and I was not really looking forward to a multiple $1,000 expense for a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a positivity box?
Do I have a positivity box? I guess it just relates to the topic from last week, which is that I've taken a little mini YouTube break. I should probably come back soon. It's been like 2 weeks, I would say, maybe 3. I don't know. Time. And I've just been studying a lot and reading every day and listening to a lot of podcasts and books and interviews and such. And it feels good. I feel like I'm learning. I don't know. I'm excited to move and have our own fridge, and to learn how to to learn how to garden. We don't have a backyard because we're moving into a condo, but we do have a little outdoor space, a little patio. It would be a balcony if it were the second floor. That's what I mean to say.
Yeah, it's a patio.
Yeah,
I think.
My mom was calling it a lanai.
A lanai?
Yeah,
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
What language is that?
Hawaiian, I think.
Okay.
A lanai.
That makes sense.
So this is going to be, I just always like to think about the progress you can make over like 10 years time with regards to what I'm studying now. And also I'm thinking about how this is the period where I'm learning how to garden for the first time, and how 10 years from now I'll be growing all my own food, and I'll have, hopefully, we'll have a place where we can put down roots, and I can have some raised garden beds and commune with the plant spirits, the tomato gods and the like.
I like how you went to a completely straight face when you said that. I mean, I want to put so when we moved from Colorado, we broke down our patio furniture and we put it in a box, and it stayed in the box the entire time we've been here. And we're going to put it right back into the pod. And I'm like, let's just set up our patio furniture, and then all the other space on the patio will be plants. Just plants. That's it.
Right. There's this YouTube channel I really like. I'm going to butcher this, I think, but I think the title of the channel is Her 86 meters squared. I think some variation on those numbers and those letters, but she basically has the amount of space we have. She has this really beautiful balcony garden that she did a lot of her own construction for. I think she made her own little greenhouse and stuff. And that's like my dream.
It's just this little space with barely any room to walk, and it's just all plants.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Beautiful, and they eat a lot of that food.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm stoked for that. Yeah, I think that sums up the
vibes.
Yeah, the vibe check,
the mood right now.
So that's what our podcast is. It's an intro, a vibe check, and a positivity box,
yes.
And then the topic. All right, let's get into it.
All right.
So this is an episode where we actually have the title or a variation on the title before the conversation. So we're going to be talking about how to know when something is a no.
Mm-hmm.
And this stems from a conversation we were having last night where we're like, what should we talk about?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just telling Sarah what was on my mind, and eventually a topic brewed.
Yeah. Or more generally, how to gain clarity on whether something is good for you or in alignment for you, I guess.
I feel like we could name half our episodes how to gain clarity on
yes.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it basically stemmed from me saying we should do an episode about the things that are difficult for us right now, mm-hmm. and how we are planning on coming out on top. So mm-hmm. we were like, how do we phrase that better?
Right.
And how do we summarize that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So where do you want to start?
You should tell them kind of what you're going through right now.
Okay. So the main thing I brought up to Sarah last night when this came up was, as you guys know, I started teaching music production classes for children, like virtual Zoom classes, and I've done 3 so far. The first one was really nerve-wracking, as you know if you've listened to the podcast. But it ended up going pretty well, and I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. And the second one, same vibes. I was like, okay, this works. I'm good at this. I'm connecting with the kids. They're learning. They seem to be having a good time. And then last week's, I came downstairs, and Sarah was like, how was it? And I was like, it was awful. I don't know if I should even be doing this.
Okay.
And I kind of just felt like I wasn't connecting with the kids, and music production is such an advanced topic, at least for me, who's been doing it for so long. I'm so far removed from being a beginner that it's hard for me to kind of, I don't know, understand what it's like for not beginners, but for children especially. Mm-hmm. You know, I had a private lesson with someone who was a beginner, but they were an adult, and we had a good conversation, and he learned some stuff. But with the kids, I'm like, I don't know exactly how to give you this information without it going over your head. And the people who run the program kind of want us to get the kids like involved right away and start working and building a song. Rather
than just lecturing them.
Yeah. And I'm like, there's so much you need to know about music first. Mm-hmm. And Sarah and I were talking through this, and I kind of came to the conclusion that I need to recontextualize a little, change my perspective, and remind myself that they are children, and I'm not here to teach them advanced things, and they're working with a pretty basic program. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I need to kind of change my perspective and how I want to approach teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want me to keep going?
Yeah. I mean, tie it into our topic here.
Well, I was wondering if I should stop doing it when the program ends. They're basically 6 to 8 week programs, so 6 to 8 classes. So it's kind of like if I don't dig it anymore, I can say, oh, I'm not going to pick up any more classes for the next round, you know? So it kind of just led to this conversation of, when do we know whether something's worth continuing to pursue, or when do you cut your losses and say, you know what, that's not for me, I'm not going to do it. And we were thinking of how it can tie into jobs, relationships, really anything.
Yes.
Anything and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So in my particular instance with this, I'm going to try to recontextualize, change how I approach it with the kids, and if it starts feeling better, that's great. And if it continues not feeling great, then at the end of the program, I'll be like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't for me.
Right.
Luckily, I'm in a position where it's not just, it's not a full-time job that I'm in or I'm out, right? Like I said, there are these blocks of classes for a few weeks. So
That's great. Like having that degree of freedom, I guess, and it not being like, it's not like your old job, which really did take up most of your every day.
Yeah.
5 days a week for years.
Yeah.
So we did not really know how to make an episode out of that topic. Because it was very top of mind for Eric yesterday, on top of the stress from the move. And we were like, should we just skip a week? Because we don't really like to come on here, as you guys know, and just kind of
be downers.
Yeah, like ruminate on issues we're going through, unless we have some sort of way that we can like abstract it so that it can be helpful for you guys too.
Yeah, I mean, our podcast, as therapeutic as it is for us sometimes, we don't have the podcast, so you guys can listen to us like
our therapist.
Like our therapist.
Yes.
I mean, like I said, it does feel that way sometimes for us, which is nice, but we want to have that effect on you guys also.
Right.
We don't want you guys to listen for an hour and be like, what? Okay, thanks for complaining to me the whole time.
Yeah.
You know.
So here's an interesting thing, and it's because we've been dating for so long, and I'm just used to how your mind works. But I think everyone kind of has a sense of how they best process information. Like some people really need to have things bounced off of someone else. Like they need to just like air everything that's in their mind and then have somebody else kind of rephrase it and say, am I hearing this right? Am I understanding this right? And ask them questions.
That's me.
Right. And some people are more like, I need to write down a pros and cons list. I need to think about it really logically. Some people, the process is very internal. So for me, I've noticed I do get some value out of like bouncing ideas off of you, but usually my decisions are very in my own head, actually in my own body. Is like I feel physical sensations when to know whether something's a appropriate action for me to take. That's another thing that goes back to the topic of intuition that we brought up, I think 2 weeks back, and which I think it needs its own episode. But like I've noticed that you, Eric.
Hi.
Because sometimes I'm like you, audience, and sometimes I'm like you, Eric.
After 57 episodes, I feel like I would have learned to just say you.
You, dear listener.
You.
Yeah. So I know that Eric benefits from just kind of like blurting things out. And sometimes I don't even need to say anything, and he'll gain that clarity just by putting it out there. But something I really like about myself is my ability to ask questions. Sometimes when Eric is talking, it becomes very clear to me that he already has made a decision, but he just needs it to be kind of validated. And like for the example I always bring up is like when he bought his guitar, his most recent guitar, he was like, it costs a lot, but I'm getting it used, but I would use it all the time, and like all of these things. And he kind of just needed me to say, like, buy it, I
needed the person I trust most in life to say, that doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Right. I already was basically going to buy it. I needed someone I respected a lot to say, that's not a bonehead move.
Right. So I've noticed that about you. And so we were having this conversation about the classes you're teaching. And I noticed that we were kind of going a little bit like circular, the conversation, which is to say that it wasn't a case where you had already made up your mind. Like you really did just need to kind of see it through. And I think a lot of us have this pressure constantly to have things planned out. Like, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? And as we've like a theme of this podcast is that there are so many things that are out of our control. And what we really have control of is what we're doing right now, like maybe just today even. And sometimes if we're trying to control things or make plans prematurely, we end up blocking a lot of the magic of, life, divine timing. And so I think if you're in this space where you don't have that clarity yet, I think a lot of us could benefit from learning how to be okay with uncertainty. Like I dealt with this too, like even when like Eric and I first started talking and I didn't know if I should go visit him because it seemed to be not a very logical thing to do, to go meet a stranger from the internet. And
especially as a small woman meeting a man. And
that was another decision that in my process was to just keep it in my mind. I didn't like bounce it off of anyone. I'm like a very secretive person. You know, I didn't really, my mom keeps giving me shit because we didn't like, she was like the last person we told that we were moving here. Like I asked my aunt who owns the house and I asked my sister and then we were like, hey mom, I think we're going to move there.
She was like, what?
I mean, it worked out. She wasn't like opposed to it or anything, but I've always been more of the ask forgiveness rather than permission type. But so I was like, do I go see this person or not? And it's so important to not feel the pressure to make promises to people all the time. Like I didn't make the decision to go see him until I absolutely knew like, yeah, this is the right decision. But you can't really rush that process, you know?
Yeah.
And so that this applies to what Eric is going through, I think, which is like sometimes we feel this sense of relief once we've made a decision and it's not always the right choice in retrospect. And so I think it's good that you're able to say like, okay, well, this is not necessarily the most ideal situation right now, but I'm going to have an open mind and see if there's any space to make it better for me and for the kids, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the other aspect of this issue for me is that starting next week, there's like a whole new block of classes, of 6-week classes. So I'm currently slated to take 3 more of them, 2 being a class about YouTube and 1 being another music production class. So Sarah asked me, she was like, oh, are you still going to do those or do you not want to now? And I'm like, I think I still will, because even if it is a little stressful and they're difficult and it ends up being like, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. I can still make it through. It'll be fine. It's not going to, right. It's not like, I don't know. It's not a life altering bad thing. Right. And I'm just like, I'm just going to kind of start over and I'm going to teach it in the way that I see the most fit, right? And I've sat in on a bunch of other teachers in their classes, and I'm like, oh, well, I kind of see how they do it, and I can do it that way. And I know the people who run the company really like this person that I'm sitting in on. So if I kind of do it like the way they're doing it, it'll work. So I'm just going to try a few different things with my current kids and the new kids I'm going to get. And if it's not good, it's not good. But something you taught me is sometimes we don't know which direction is going to be the right one to choose. You're like, I don't know which way is correct. Right. So you just choose one, and if it feels wrong, it's the wrong way to go, and you can choose a different one after.
Yeah. Which
it's like Google Maps.
Yes, this isn't to diminish the value of committing to things. I'm very, I'm like that Taurus energy here. So I usually, when you ask me to do something and I commit, I take a long time to decide whether I'm going to commit. But if I commit, I will always see it through. I hate canceling. I hate, I don't like skipping episodes, for example. There's been a couple of situations where I've committed to like a sponsorship and then I've felt like a little, I don't know, it's not been fun for me, but I've always been it's been very important for me to always do the things that I say I'm going to do. And I think that when we talk about uncertainty, what you do is you still commit to actions, but you decrease the time frame that you're committing to something. So it's not about being flaky and like reactive all the time or being like a diva, it's about just not over committing,
Yeah.
So it's not you saying, so like, here's my example is like, a while back, I had been approached by a brand who wanted to work with me, and they gave me an option to work with them for either a 6-month, I was going to say lease, what's the word? Contract, or a year. And everything in my logical mind was saying like, yes, this brand is in touch with my values. Like, it's a good brand. I don't have any, reservations about supporting them. And it will be good to have this stable this stable source of income for a year. So I immediately, without even thinking about it, was like, yes, let's a year. 6 months later, it became clear that it wasn't really a product that I personally would be using that often. And I ended up having to kind of force myself to keep using it just to fulfill that end of the bargain. Not that it was like a bad product, but just for my lifestyle, it wasn't correct. Yeah. And if I had just, anytime you're having reservations, if you use too much logic, rationality sometimes to make that decision because you're feeling that mental pressure to make a decision, it's not, first off, you don't always need to make that commitment. Like I could have committed to 6 months and then reevaluated it and continued on with them for another 6 months. But the fear and the stress made me overcommit, essentially. Yeah. And I think that's very common because I think a lot of us are very wired to make decisions from fear, like in a sense of scarcity. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think it's really lucky that you have the freedom to make the decision every 6 weeks instead of years at a time.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of do that Google Maps thing and say, I'm going to try going this different direction with the kids and see how it feels, and hopefully it'll be for the better. In case you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, the Google Maps thing this is just Sarah's analogy for choosing.
Talked about it before, I think, on the podcast.
Yeah. It's basically like, when you're using Google Maps or Apple Maps and it's confused and doesn't know how to orient you and where your car is facing and driving, mm-hmm. you just start driving down one road and eventually it's like, oh, okay, I know where you are now and you got to go this way. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the same thing, right? You pick a direction, you start going, and maybe you'll say, this is not correct. I got to turn around.
Right. Yeah.
Figuratively.
Yeah, when there is that ambiguity. I mean, usually the Google Maps thing is happening when you're like in a parking lot or you're in a neighborhood mm-hmm. or like you're underneath, when one road overlaps another, mm-hmm. like there's an overpass, I guess. But usually it happens when you're moving slowly and the device just doesn't have enough to know where exactly you are and what direction you're in. Mm-hmm. And it really requires you to, if as long as you stay where you are, you're not going to get that additional feedback. It's not going to course correct. So it requires sometimes picking up velocity to get the feedback you need. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't even matter which direction you go in, so long as you do move and commit to some direction. And I think that people's paralysis and their need to commit to things large things up front really does come from that space of I'm afraid to go anywhere if it's not going to take me to a clear destination. Mm-hmm. But I think it is, like we said at the beginning, this can be applied to everything, really. Yeah. Like career, relationships, or that question, what am I supposed to be doing in the world? What is my passion? Some people, even a couple of years back, I wasn't really sure, what am I supposed to be doing in the world? I know I like learning about psychology, but I don't want to be a counselor. I like cooking, but I don't want to work in a restaurant. And it was just sometimes you just have to accept that you don't have all of the information you need, but that doesn't mean that you can't still make progress in some direction. And what it requires is, instead of making a commitment to something that might not be in alignment for you, kind of just picking something. Like if you do not know what your passion is, like what are you here to do in the world? What should your career be? Do anything. Just try new things. So I just tried making a YouTube video and I got really good feedback, you know?
And kind of the opposite for me in a way. You know, a few months ago, I was like, oh, I'm gonna start making YouTube videos about all these home studio recording tips and tricks and whatnot. Are you freezing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm always cold.
You look really cold. Yeah, so I made a few YouTube videos and I was like, I don't know, it doesn't feel amazing. And then, like I've talked about last week, I put some feelers out on the internet and found some people who would want to take like home studio recording private lessons with me. So I did one of them and it felt really great. And I kind of realized, you know, maybe if I want to teach people about the one thing I know the most about, maybe the YouTube platform just isn't how I'm supposed to do it. And I mean, if you've been listening for a while, you know that's my personality is I'm good at talking to people and interacting with them. So it makes sense that a one-on-one quote unquote practice would be right up my alley and feel better than doing the YouTube thing. Where I feel like I don't know who I'm talking to. I'm kind of just talking generally at the internet. And it just doesn't work the best for me. Like I'm good at talking to people directly. And even with the kids, it's like, sure, there are 3 of them instead of 1 of them, but at least I'm interacting with them face to face, virtually.
Yeah, but I think it's so valuable that you did when you weren't really sure in what direction to take your like music teaching career. Because you live with me and I do YouTube, it seemed very accessible to you and it seemed to make sense. So that's something that you tried because it just seemed like the next logical step. But it's so important that you did try it and you realized what wasn't ideal about it to get that feedback, right? Because I think we have to reframe what mistakes are. Like mistakes are not wasted time. They're time that we use to gain clarity on what's preferred, essentially. So if we can stop beating ourselves up about, you know, that guy that you dated for however long and it was crap and now I'm just older and I'm not any better off for it, or like, oh, I just worked a job I hated for 10 years. It's like you have to give yourself some grace and know that that's just how long it took you to learn what is preferred. So if instead of marking, like scratching off an entire experience, job, relationship, etc., or even like hobbies sometimes, like I've talked about how I hop from hobby to hobby and I'd make investments in those hobbies and then I regret it, you know? Like if we can just accept that you don't know things until you know them, and that as long as you're out there trying new things and like kind of like bumping up against life, as it were, like you are informing yourself more, you're gathering more information. So in the process of making videos about music education, Eric realized like, oh, I'm missing this personal element. I'm missing the back and forth, you know? Which
is why when I started dating Sarah and I started telling my family and everyone I'm close with what she does, and I'm like, oh, you know, here's her YouTube channel, and they're like, oh, I thought you said she was introverted. Like here she is in front of a camera, like, welcome back to Sarah's Vegan Kitchen. They're like, what's that about? Yeah. And I'm like, I don't really know. I don't really get it. But now as our relationship has gone on, and I know more about like the YouTuber side and like how YouTubers are and feel. Like, I think about Jasmine from Sweet Simple Vegan. I'm like, she's also, like, Chris is the outgoing one, like me, and Jasmine's a little shyer and quieter. Yeah. But, like, she's also great in front of the camera. And it's because, you're not talking to anyone. And I can understand why people who have more social anxiety are good at that. And that's the exact flip side of why it's harder for me, because I'm like, I don't like talking to no one. I like knowing who I'm talking to, and I change the way I speak and the way I interact depending on the person. That's like one of my strengths, right? So as a communicator, So it makes perfect sense why the YouTube thing works for some people. And yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this takes it even further. This is great because if you can consider something that, consider a time when you did something and it didn't turn out the way you wanted, but you think about how many times maybe you tried to do the same thing over and over again, different variations on that because you saw it work out for somebody else and still not satisfying, not successful, not good. And then you make it about what's wrong with you instead of letting it point you to what your actual talents are. Mm-hmm. So it's not that Eric made the videos, didn't enjoy it, or didn't get like the feedback he wanted. And then he said, well, I need to change me so that I can perform this duty better. He instead said like, well, what's missing in this circumstance? Or what talents do I have that aren't being well utilized in this circumstance? And then it became very clear, like, oh, I don't like the like impersonal, not that YouTube can't be like a dialogue between you and your viewers, but.
Well, especially for someone like me who doesn't have a following,
mm-hmm.
right? And I was just making videos because in order to have a following, you got to make videos first. Yeah. So I was kind of doing it without having anyone to have a rapport with,
mm-hmm.
you know? And I'm kind of realizing as we talk more about it that my personality is, like, I have a base personality, and then really depending who I'm talking with, it's like, it's just different between people. And I don't know what part of my chart, my personality, like, that's how I am. And I'm sure there are a ton of other people like me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm by myself in a room with a camera, I'm like, how do I act? I'm not used to acting like myself. I'm used to just, it's easy to be myself in here in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, wait, how do I just communicate when there's no one around? What do I do?
Well, that's an interesting thing because all of the personalities that you adopt in one-on-one conversations still exist when you're in front of a camera.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't know which one to bring out.
Yeah, and I'm just like flipping between ones and I'm editing and I'm like, I'm acting a little weird, aren't I?
Well, you're like, do I want to do comedy videos or do I want to be really authoritative? Do I want to be kind of funny and quirky? Do I want to be like calming, like just the teacher, the serene teacher? And it's like you go through all of those things and you're like, well, you weren't getting the same like degree of satisfaction as you would if you had somebody like, I don't know, like you thrive so much when you see that other people are at ease in your presence. So to not get that back. And then on YouTube, like the audience is as multifaceted as you are. So it's like one of your personalities is bound to irritate one of the millions of other personalities that could stumble upon your work.
Which is why putting yourself out on the internet is tough sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it goes back to the beginning of the conversation where talking about me and feedback and bouncing ideas off. It's the same thing. It's like I base how I act based on the feedback of the person I'm interacting with.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't interact with you, your sister, and your mom the same way.
Yeah.
Like I interact 3 different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was an interesting little tangent to investigate a little.
Right. But it's interesting that now you're like totally at peace with not making YouTube videos on that topic. But
I think I bought a green screen.
You could send it back.
We can use it for the podcast.
You know, I don't think we will, but maybe we have like swirling galaxies in the background. But I think it's cool. Like sometimes it's really hard to let go of a possibility, even though it isn't really satisfying us, and we keep trying in different versions of it. I don't know. I don't want to send across the message that you should give up either. Like I said, this isn't about being flaky. It's about not trying to basically brainwash yourself into thinking that because something works for someone else that it has to work for you. Or it's about not making yourself feel bad if you just have to say like, this isn't my path. Yeah. You know, but it's also about also not rushing to the conclusion that it's not for you. You know, it's about just being open on both ends
and really taking the time and energy to consider what you're feeling.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, but it's tough because our feelings can change so much. So like I said, I've done one private tutoring session for music production. And over the course of an hour, like the first 20 minutes, I was like, oh my God, this was a huge mistake. I can't do this. Like this isn't working. And then the last 40 minutes, I was like a few things clicked and I was like, oh no. Now we're doing it. Like now I'm teaching. Now he's learning. Like this makes sense. So by the end of it, I was like, okay, I can do this. This, right? And it's like the self-doubt comes in and there are just all these aspects that you have to like dig into. And it's hard. It takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Right. It takes a lot of emotional energy to do that. But it just goes to show how quickly things in your mind can change.
Yeah.
Right. Do you want to take a quick little break and thank some people? And then we can continue on with the conversation. Okay, it is time for our supporter shout out. Hi guys, we're pausing this conversation for a few moments to give a big thank you to our supporters. These are our listeners who make a monthly contribution through Anchor, which is our hosting platform. If you'd like to become a supporter as well, you can visit anchor.fm/whatislifedude and click on the support button.
And if you enjoy the show, another great way to support us is by giving us a positive rating and a review on iTunes. Just takes a few moments and it helps new listeners find the podcast so we can continue to grow our community. So thank you so much to everyone who supports us in one way or another. This podcast wouldn't exist without you guys.
So without further ado, shout out to our Anchor supporters, Inga Pfeiffer, Morgan Lassiter, Jennifer, Scotty Draper, Glenn Ames, Kevin Dooley, Jessica Chelgren, Marie Zimmerman, Nina Schmidt, Izzy, Alexis Dooley, Annalise, Nadia, Teresa Madara, Kelsey Pritchett, Ellis Adler, Quinn, Anna Dureka, Megan Stewart, Samantha McIntyre, Dylan Schaubin, and Sarah Creighton. And now back to the show. And we're back. Okay, so I feel like we've talked a lot about mostly what the conversation was going to be about. So,
Good.
Like I feel like we did the meat of the episode, and the supporter shout out happened a little later. But I want to, something we talked about last night, I want to just get an example from your life on this topic. Can I ask you about your voice lessons and how the topic applies to the voice lessons?
Okay, so
because that's something that you were like on and off about.
Yeah.
But you were like, okay, I'm gonna push forward, and well, you tell it.
Yes. Okay. I guess this is useful. I really like concrete examples to make things feel real, so that it's not just all really airy-fairy. So I've taken voice lessons from two different teachers. I took them in 2019 for several months. And then I started taking them again shortly before a move until a few weeks back. And now I'm not taking them. So the first time around, I learned a lot, but I was feeling like I wasn't getting out of them what I wanted to. Like I was learning a lot about technique and about, I think the most valuable thing for me was just learning how to be comfortable in front of other people because I'm very self-critical. And sometimes my fear of like performing in front of other people makes me not take risks or push as hard as I could. So basically I wasn't able to perform in front of my teacher like the same way that I would if I were like alone. I even feel that way in front of Eric sometimes, you know, and we're very close. So I think that was my most important lesson there. But it sort of got to a point where it felt like I had like hit a wall with that teacher, I guess. So I stopped going. Then a year and something passes and I decided I wanted to try to find another teacher who maybe their teaching style would resonate more with me. So I found a really great one, and she came at it with more of like, I want to even say spiritual, but she didn't market herself as spiritual, which is crazy that I found her.
Yeah. Very divine.
I just found her by looking up San Diego vocal coaches, and it turns out she's very interested in yoga and breath work, and a lot of our sessions would be it was like so much less aggressive than my previous teacher, who was a male, and he would have me doing like crazy voice warm-ups, and like he really focused on how loud you can project. I think he was more into like performing, like live performance and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I would always leave those lessons feeling very burnt out. And so I really, really enjoyed the new approach from my new teacher, who's a female, like very gentle, lots of breath work, lots of vocal toning. She introduced me to the Shruti box, which I've mentioned in a couple of episodes. I really, really want to save up and get one, but it's like a droning instrument.
How big are they? Can you give me? I don't even.
Like,
Okay, so you can put
not
on
too
your lap.
big. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then she kind of, I don't know, I feel like working with her led me into all of this exploration about like how different sounds and syllables are connected to like different energy centers in the body and all of that stuff. So it's like, it was the entryway into my interest into like sound healing, which I really want to explore once we move and I can start acquiring far too many instruments and crystal bowls and such.
It's just funny that you found her kind of on a whim because you took the step of saying like, well, I don't really love this first teacher, so I'm going to allow myself to move on. And now it's like, I feel like it's opened up, even if it's not, I don't know, even if it doesn't seem like this is the case, it's opened up like this other side of your spirituality. And like, as someone who's now teaching lessons, if you don't like my style and you feel like you could do better with somebody else, go do it. Because you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
to take the, not take the chance, but to take the action to say, well, this guy's not working for me, I'm going to try someone else. Like, good, you should do that.
Yeah.
And this is why.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different approaches to every single discipline. There's so many. And I feel like the difference between my two teachers, and it just so happens that one of them was male and one of them was female, but like the difference between, it's like that yin and yang energy. It's like he was so like an aggressive teacher, like, let's run these drills, let's project, let's go through this section of the song and this section of the song. And like, that and we would always practice with a karaoke track, so it was just loud and all of that, and then she has a much more like receptive, like, let's focus on the fundamentals, like, let's learn how to breathe first, let's learn how to calm down your nervous system, let's learn how to just hum, you know, which is like, I learned from both, but it's really useful to like take things back to like the most basic, right? Like just humming. Body loves to hum too. It releases all sorts of positive hormones that calm you down. But yeah, so I started working with her, and I'm a very socially anxious person. So every week it would be like an hour or two before my lesson, and I'd be feeling really sick and I just anxious, and I couldn't eat and I didn't want to drink, and I was always like, okay, after this lesson, I'm going to cancel, because it's just right now I'm not equipped to handle it, and I don't want to push myself too hard. And then I would do the lesson, and then I would feel really good. And I'd be like, wow, this doesn't make sense. Like, why? And then same thing would happen week after week. I'd be really anxious. I'd really want to quit or like find some way to, I'm sick.
Well,
I got in a car crash. I can't make it.
It's not even an exaggeration either. Like, you felt like terrible
Yeah.
before your lessons, and then you'd come in to the room after, you'd be like, baby, I'm done, give me a hug now. And I'm like, so it went well.
Yeah.
But it still wasn't, I don't know. Well, you stopped, right? That's like the culmination, is that you did end up ending them.
Right.
Tell us why.
I got to a point where I realized that, well, and I'm not opposed to taking them back up again, but when we talked about rest in our previous episode, I quit basically right on the heels of completing all those projects that had been stressing me out for so many months. And I just felt like sometimes doing something challenging and scary for your own good, like is for your own good. It's an act of self-love to kind of push yourself to be uncomfortable, to take your discomfort or your anxiety through something new. And that's how it felt for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then after I had this little break for work, I decided like I would like to apply this restful attitude towards everything. So I want to create some space to explore music kind of on my own terms using all the things we've learned. So I think if that's kind of where I came at it.
Yeah, I mean, some things, when you push yourself to do them and they're difficult, you come out and you're like, oh, I really grew from that. And then other things, you're like, that just made me feel worse and worse as time went on. And it's about like investigating which one it is inside yourself.
Yeah. I think weirdly enough, like money, like the way you feel about, like if it's something that you're paying to do or getting paid to do, the way that you feel about your money after that transaction tells you a lot about whether it's aligned for you. So it got to a point with my last teacher where I didn't feel good that I was paying them anymore. And I was like, okay, well, this is my sign to leave. Yeah. And I never really got to that point with my most recent teacher. I always felt like even if we didn't necessarily do anything super challenging, like there were days when I would go in and my voice was tired because we'd filmed the podcast or I'd filmed a bunch for work. And we were like, okay, we'll just take it easy. I never felt like, oh, I don't want to pay her. You know, I always felt very aligned with that. But I also at the end decided, I don't know, it became less of a thing like, do I quit? Do I not? Is there something in it for me? Is there some reason, something that the fear is bringing up for me to address
it's
and
like clouding,
work through?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard to tell, like whether the anxiety you're feeling is because you're violating one of your boundaries or because you need to prove to yourself, like, yes, I can do this. Yeah, it's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, it's like sometimes it's like, am I just kind of anxious about it and it's clouding my judgment and like really everything's fine?
Yeah.
Or do I really just not like it? Right? It's like, it's the same as, is it a learning experience or do I just hate it? You know?
And like I had all these things going through my mind week after week and I would always just forget to cancel in time. And I have this very like, you know, this view of my life that if something is happening, then there has to be some reason for it. It helps me sleep at night. So I was like, okay, well, I didn't remember to cancel. There must be something here for me to learn this week at least. Yeah. And then I finally one week remembered like, okay, this is a good time for me to stop. And it felt very easy. It felt very like I wasn't stressed out about sending the email like I usually would have been. I'm very confrontation avoidant.
Yeah.
And I feel bad. Like even telling my aunt who rents us this room, like it took me days to text her that we were moving because I felt bad because like she works in the airline and I know pandemic has screwed up a lot of that for a lot of airline employees. And, you know, we were giving her a little bit of extra income by renting the room and I just felt bad. And I feel like everything's my fault all the time. Anyway,
well, I think an important thing, I feel like we're nearing the end of the conversation and I want to kind of just round it out a little bit and say like, it really goes to show that we as humans, I mean, maybe this doesn't apply to everyone, but I'm sure it mostly does, going to assume, it's like we tend to think everything is a really big deal when sometimes it's just not as big of a deal as we're making it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, for example, if you wanted, and this isn't your fault or anyone's fault or my fault when it happens, it's just how our brains work, I think. It's like you didn't want to cancel the lessons and you didn't want to do that whole thing. But in reality, you can go back and do it whenever you want. You can be like, hey, I want to start up again. And
yeah.
She'd be like, oh, okay, great.
I probably will at some point too.
Yeah. And it's like, well, with my teaching the kids job, it's like, well, I'm sure if it gets to a point where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, I feel like I'm going to be like, do I really want to stop? Do I really want to quit? But then really, since they're in, like I said, 6-week blocks, if a few months go by and I want to do it again and try again, I could be like, hey, actually, I want to teach some more class. And they'd be like, all right, you're on board. Obviously, there are times where it is a bigger decision to make. But my point is basically sometimes we make them feel more intense than they actually are.
I would agree.
You know?
I mean, I'm like the queen of doing that, right? Everything feels gigantic to me. And then I come in with this innate sense of guilt, which compounds my experience of that. But yeah, I guess to bring it back to the original like process of gaining clarity and determining when is this a no, I knew it was time to at least take a break from the lessons when I think here's the hallmark of a grounded decision is that you don't feel like your brain is chaotic when you're making the decision and you're just trying to make the decision to feel better. Like it's more like it felt like it had come to its natural conclusion. And I didn't feel conflicted about it. I didn't feel like if I quit, I'd be running away from something or I'd be missing out on something valuable. I just saw it as me making space for a different way to interact with music for a little while. I'm very into kind of letting seasons, like physical weather seasons, guide my actions. I don't know if everyone feels the same, but I'm very comfortable during wintertime with moving slower, with producing less, with letting things fall away, right? If you think about trees dying, quote unquote, dying during the winter, it's very necessary for them to conserve their energy so that they can come back like even better and more colorful the next year. So I feel like I'm in this space where I've pared everything down to the bare minimum in many ways. My belongings, how I spend my time, my purchases especially, which has felt really, really good. And like taking a little break from the lessons too, and not needing to always... I think play is really... Maybe an episode on play needs to happen, like the importance of play. Like I am very achievement oriented, I guess. And so I've always felt like sometimes I'll watch people perform music and it will make me feel shitty about myself because I feel like I don't have the technical skill that they do and that I never will. And that's why I've always sought out lessons, because I want someone to help me get to my goals as fast as possible. But I think what I'm learning now is that structure and discipline is very useful sometimes, but sometimes you can learn just as much by just allowing yourself to play with a medium or an experience. So it goes for music, it goes with like getting a set of watercolors and not following a tutorial, but just kind of like seeing what comes up. Or even with, exercise that we've been talking about a lot. Just going out into nature, but bringing a book or listening to a YouTube video and not feeling this pressure to get somewhere all the time. Just enjoying the process. I like doing that during this season, especially.
Yeah, I think those are like the two approaches to learning and getting better at things. I mean, I learned how to record and produce music by doing both aspects.
Yeah.
Right. I just messed around and Googled stuff and watched videos and just played around for hours and hours on my computer. And sometimes I learned a lot, and other times I was like, what is happening? And then I also went to school, and I went to college and learned it in school and got a degree in it. And it's like I learned a lot from both aspects.
Yeah.
Right. And the people who are reaching out to me for music production lessons they're like, yeah, I watch a bunch of YouTube videos and I play around myself a lot, but there's just more I want to learn. So yeah, I think both are really important. But the last thing I want to say is I find it so fascinating how this like saying no right? This topic, it really does apply to things so big and so small. Like I remember last week or the week before on the podcast, I talked about putting down the book Artemis. And we talked about like the sunk cost.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Sunk cost
bias.
Yes. It's like kind of similar, right? It's like I didn't know if I should just keep doing it or if I should just stop listening to it. So like this topic applies to things so trivial, at like reading a book and saying, I don't really like it. Should I just stop? Right. And then all the way to bigger things like jobs, careers, relationships. Mm-hmm. So hopefully this conversation, by hearing our experiences, helped you. Hopefully it related to something that you're going through or have gone through in your life, and lets you think about things in a new way. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else to add? I always feel like I never know if you're.
I really de-escalate at the end of the conversation. It's like I start out kind of calm, and then I get really loud and animated, and then when it's clear that you're kind of winding it down, I just.
You really like decompress.
Yeah, and I'm like, yes.
Close out the show, Eric.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully this was helpful in some way, and we will talk to you next week on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes.
That was new. Bye.
Get your podcasts.